I guess it's sort of, for me, it's the spring Thanksgiving. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
I'm a lacrosse guy, so it's sort of, I get ideally not around here, but you hope the warm weather or warm-ish is coming. Um, I'm not a heat guy either, but I don't know. It's just I'm not the biggest
Disappointing
religious
that you're
guy.
not.
No, yeah, I know. I'm not the biggest religious guy, but I try to do things right, so that's part of it as well. I think. I don't know. It's just always been a sneaky favorite of mine.
I think it's a great holiday. I mean, again, being Greek, it's our biggest holiday. So we go all out. We fast all week and then we stuff our faces come Saturday night, midnight into Sunday, and all we do is eat and drink. I mean, everything shuts down in Greece. So to Greeks, Easter's bigger than Christmas. So um, it's always been a big deal in my house. But like I said, again, I get the sense that for whatever reason, I feel like it's being diminished in our country, and that's a shame because it is a great holiday, and it's a holiday that we should value and cherish, especially if you're a Christian. So, whatever. I do want to remind you that if you are in the market to purchase your next home and sell your current home, purchase your first home or refinance, give our good buddy Herb Devine a call at 781-254-2846. You can also shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. With over 27 years of experience, Herb has the knowledge and the know-how to help you in this process. Speaking of spring, this is the biggest season in the real estate market. More properties are on the market, more people are looking to buy. If you need someone in your corner that knows what they're doing, especially when it comes to loans and lending, Herb is your guy. Again, give him a call at 781-254-2846 or shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. All right, sorry, had to pause there for a sec to cough, Stone. A lot to say there. And speaking of a lot to do, Patriots offseason officially began today with voluntary workouts. By all accounts, it looks like the majority of the team is in town to participate in the voluntary workouts. This is phase one of the offseason workout schedule. This will get you through April. And then in early May, you get into phase two, which gets you through most of May. And then at the end of May, right around Memorial Day, you get into phase three. And phase three gets you all the way to the middle of June and mandatory minicamp. But like I said, turnout's been great by all accounts. Pretty much all the free agents who signed are in town. A lot of the veterans who were on the roster are in town. The buy-in looks pretty good. Unlike last year where Gerard Mayo chose to wait a week so that the staff can, quote, get on the same page. Mike Vrabel, as soon as he could start, he gets started. Of course, it is important to point out that this is a 90-minute workout and the players can be on the premises for 2 hours in phase one. That is all as part of the collective bargaining agreement. But nonetheless, I'm not going to go as far as saying football season is here, but things are ramping up. Of course, the draft is 2 weeks from Thursday. But nonetheless, this was unofficially day one of Mike Vrabel coaching the New England Patriots.
Yeah, no, I mean it is sort of here. Um, Look, minicamp is in a month. Like they'll be in the building a lot more coming up, and I'd like to think, I know it's voluntary, but guys might stick around and continue working through the off season. So it is sort of here, and we'll hear from a few guys tomorrow and Thursday. Tomorrow it's Harold Landry and Marcus Jones. Thursday is Garrett Bradbury and Antonio Gibson. So I like the balance there of new and old sort of getting their feet wet with us in the media again. And yeah, football season's here. You're right about the buy-in, and based on the videos, it looks like a lot of guys are there. I thought the biggest thing was Christian Barmore. Vrabel said last week that he was expected to be there, and he looks good. I know he's just, lifting weights and all sweaty, but it's better than not seeing him there. So that's probably the biggest news out of today.
Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, if he's been cleared and he's healthy to participate in the offseason workouts and he could be a part of this, it's huge news for the Patriots. You know how much they missed him last year. I mean, they miss him in terms of their run defense. They miss him in terms of their pass rush. Getting him back as your three tech and pairing him up with Milton Williams, that's going to be one of the three best interior defensive line duos in the league. So seeing him lifting and working out again is a great sign. He looks like he's in really good shape. Of course, Matt Collins, one of the free agents, one of the 15 free agents that the Patriots have signed thus far this offseason. He showed up barefoot today. It was a mix of rain and snow, and this dude comes strolling in with no shoes on. He is, I'm telling you, man, it's going to be fun covering this dude. And of course, everybody and their mother, they put out a video of the players picking tonight's national championship game in basketball, and you catch him in the background. He didn't participate in that, at least as far as we could tell. But you catch him in the background, and he's walking in with no shoes on. He's a character. It's nice to see. I think he's going to keep it light in the locker room. But yeah, I mean, again, I think, look, it's voluntary. Okay, your veterans in particular don't necessarily need to be at your phase one workouts. They can opt out and say, you know what? Yeah, I might have a workout bonus at stake here, but I'm going to choose to stay home and continue to work out with my personal trainers and do my thing. And then when it's time for me to show up, I will. Or when it's time for us to do the on-field work, I'll show up. I mean, the turnout is impressive, and I think it speaks to the newness of it all. Obviously, if you just signed a couple of weeks ago, you want to make a good first impression on your head coach and your staff, your coordinators and your position coaches. You're going to show up. So that's not a surprise considering Vrabel's going into his first year. But again, I think it also, going back to the point I made earlier about Mayo starting a week later last year, I think it also illustrates that the majority of this staff has worked together before. They know what they're doing. They know what they want, and they're ready to go from day one. They're not waiting a week. They're not buying extra time to get on the same page. They're already on the same page, and they're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, and it's funny. Last week at the owners' meetings, Vrabel, jokingly or maybe not so jokingly, said I wrote the players a voluntary letter telling them they voluntarily could show up, or something along those lines. So, look, it obviously means a lot, and there's clearly been an emphasis on culture in terms of roster building. You don't really know that culture until guys start getting in there and getting together. So the quicker it's built, the better.
Yeah, no, and the culture is a big piece, and Vrabel's talked about that since he's taken the job, that culture and character are going to matter. And again, it's debatable with some of these signings if they were culture or character driven. No, I'm not knocking the players or their character by any means. I mean, the Stephon Diggs signing, for example, right? In the past, he's been a little vocal about his touches and his role in an offense. Obviously, the Vrabel and the Crafts must have felt comfortable with bringing him in and talking to him and getting a sense of where his head's at, because if they weren't comfortable with him, they wouldn't have signed him and paid him as much as they did. So
yeah,
clearly he's buying in as well. And my point was, a lot of the free agents they signed, these are character culture guys that are going to buy in.
I don't think we've talked about Diggs since it happened, or if we did, I don't know if I mentioned this, but
we did.
The
it didn't
fact
just happen last week, though. We did.
Look, man, I'm in 2 seasons right now, but the whole him being a diva thing, look, I think he knows his age and he knows where he's at in terms of coming off the injury. Like, that's the least of my concerns with him right now, is him becoming a diva with Drake May. I think he's just at a point where A, he wants to help, and B, you can't be a diva coming off an ACL. You don't know what you are yet. So people automatically assuming that he might be a problem and it was a bad signing, or sort of not an impact signing, if you will. Just a bad take, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's an awful take. It's stupid. But nonetheless, it's great to see the players back in the facility. They're back now. They're going to be back for a while here. In essence, for the next 2 months, they're going to be in the facility as they work through the 3 phases of the offseason. And of course, one of the important points to point out is there is no contact. There are no pads during phase 1, 2, or 3. There'll be helmets, but there's no contact in terms of pads and physical contact that way. So it's a lot of mental work. You're installing your base offense, base defense, your adjustments, your checks. That's what you're doing. It's a lot of the beginning of the playbook stuff here in the next few weeks as the Patriots get rolling here and get acclimated to Mike Vrabel. I was going to jump to the next topic, which is the Joe Milton trade. And Ken Matthias, who checks in on a weekly basis, asked us about that. Thanks for checking in, Ken. What was you guys' initial reaction to Joe Milton III wanting out of New England? I also believe he could beat out Drake May, according to recent reports. Well, I think a lot of those reports are stupid. He might have believed that, but there was no competition. This is Drake May's team. This is Drake May's job. So I'm not, even if he believed he's better than May and he could beat him out, I mean, he had to know it wasn't going to happen here. And that's obviously what happened in this case. This is why he asked for a trade. He ultimately gets traded to Dallas for a 5th round pick, Milton and a 7th round pick go to the Cowboys. And, you know, when I first saw this happen last week, Kevin, my initial reaction was, what's your hurry? Why are you looking to trade him already? And why not wait and possibly hold on for a better return? And then the more I thought about it, and the more you heard coming out, and I talked to a couple of people too that said that he didn't want to be here. He felt that he wanted to go to a situation where he can either get an opportunity to play or have a possibility or the potential to start. Now, it's interesting because I don't see how that's Dallas. I mean, that's Dak Prescott's team unless Milton impresses enough. Prescott gets hurt, he gets to play, and continues to impress, and then he Wally pips him. But as of now, I don't see that being the case. All that being said, just some initial thoughts, and I know you wrote about it, but just some initial thoughts on this trade. And did they pull the trigger too soon? Should they have waited, or they did it at the right time and they got just about what you thought they were going to get for him?
Yeah, a few things. One, I didn't think it was enough. The early talk, a second was never in the cards, but
It was never going to be in the cards. Neither was a third.
no,
I've talked to people that said to me, people up there really need to re-examine their viewpoint of things because no team was going to give them a third for him. Never mind a second.
No, I thought a 4th was reasonable. And we had talked to people at certain.
But on the basis of what, though?
Well, in full transparency, we talked to a few people at some pro days, and they thought a 4 was more realistic. So I was sort of going off of that. But either way, yeah, I thought they rushed it. At least wait until the draft. If someone gets crazy and wants to offer you something after some quarterbacks go off the board or something like that. I know it's non-contact, but what if something happens to May in minicamp, or hell, I would have held them till training camp even at that point and see, what someone wants later in the summer if a quarterback goes down there as well. But look, in terms of going to Dallas, Dak isn't the most, sure guy in terms of playing all year. So he might end up getting time out there that he might not have seen here. So who knows? But yeah, I thought it was a little bit rushed. But I also never thought, I thought Vrabel gave it away during those owners' meetings when he said, yeah, we'll see if he's here. And he said even before April 7th. So they were already having discussions and talking about it. So I thought he sort of gave it away at that point, and everyone just sort of glossed over it. But surprising in terms of, I thought they would wait until the draft, but not surprising in general that he's out of here. I think Vrabel wants to draft his own young quarterback to be behind Drake.
Yeah, I thought he'd be here longer. I'm not that surprised they traded him. I thought he would be here longer. I thought they might hold on to him a little longer. But by all accounts, he didn't want to be here anymore. He wanted out. And you can make the argument, who cares what he wants? He's going into his second year. He was a 6th-round draft choice. Who is he to dictate terms? In fact, our good friend Bill Vaughn, who just checked in, he says they gave Milton away for nothing. What was the urgency? Bill also goes on to say, even if he didn't want to be here, why does a late-round first-year player dictate terms? That's a good question. But going back to the culture character piece, I'm sure in Mike Vrabel's eyes, he's not going to want a backup quarterback being a distraction. And so if there was some internal belief in the building that this kid could potentially be a problem, be a distraction, and there's nothing in his history. He was in college for a long time between Michigan and Tennessee. There's nothing in his history to suggest he would be a problem. But if they thought he could potentially be a problem, I could see them saying, you know what? It's not even so much about doing right by him as much as it is, let's just get him out of here, trade him somewhere where there's interest and they want him. And the Cowboys showed interest relatively early. Jerry Jones loves his big quarterbacks with big-time arm talent. This is why they traded for Trey Lance a couple of years ago. But I think at the end of the day, Dallas put a 5th-round pick on the table. It's better than what they spent to get him last year. It's a better pick, if you will, that they're getting in return. Yeah, they had to give up the 7 as a sweetener, but I think at the end of the day, again, I go back to what I said a couple minutes ago. This idea that they were going to get a second or a third round pick, that's fantasy island shit. That was never going to happen. Let's not kid ourselves here. Okay. They were never going to get that. Even the fourth round pick, had they held on to him and let's say a team had their starting quarterback suffer a catastrophic injury in the preseason, could they have potentially squeezed a fourth round pick out of that team? Maybe. But the belief in NFL circles is that he wasn't going to fetch that they did about as well as they were going to do getting the fifth round pick. And again, let's not overvalue the guy here. Yes, he played well in the season finale, 22 of 27, threw a touchdown pass, ran around, looked pretty good against Buffalo's 2s and 3s. But he's not the second coming of Tom Brady here. They didn't get rid of a future Hall of Famer 6th round pick. At the end of the day, he could very well go to Dallas, get that opportunity and blossom. That is definitely possible. But I think at the end of the day, you can question the timing of it. And did they rush this? But at the same time, again, you're not giving up on some kind of a difference maker on your roster. This is Drake May's football team. It's going to be his football team until he either becomes a entrenched, successful starter that has a long career, or he flames out and they end up moving on from him. But until then, Joe Milton was never going to be in the mix to do anything here other than be a backup to Drake May. So I think in the end, if it was causing a kerfuffle in the locker room and within the organization, it was the right move to move on from him.
Two more quick things before we move on. One, it doesn't add up that they would bend over backwards for him and send him somewhere he wants if they thought he was a problem in the locker room. So
right. So you bring up a good point, because a couple of people that I talked to said he wasn't a problem, but he was very vocal about how he felt through his agent. He was very vocal about how he felt about his situation. Now, I don't buy this bullshit that's out there that Drake May was partly behind this. He felt threatened by him. He wasn't comfortable with him being there. I think this is a load of nonsense. And some members of the media will leech onto that and make it a story, but I don't think it's a story. But nonetheless, from what I've heard, he wasn't becoming a problem per se, but he was very open about his desire to have an opportunity to start. And he felt, and I don't know how true this is, but from what I was told, he verbalized that he felt he should get that opportunity here. Now, again, I don't know how true that is, but clearly something was going on, because, again, to your point, what's your hurry to trade the guy?
So, great. And that means he's confident, and he should be. That's the way I look at that. So, on the Drake May thing, look, we saw him interact with his brothers last year when he got drafted. I don't think that's a kid that's shying away from competition. If anything, I think he's embracing it. And the other thing, too, I lost my third thing. What was I completely forgot the other thing I was going to say. But that Drake May thing, it doesn't make sense to me. Just seeing, look, his little brothers called him a bitch after he got drafted last year. Like, I don't think that's a kid who's worried about Joe Milton taking his job.
Well, I think he was kidding about him being a bitch, though.
No, of course, but
I mean, I know this is a family show, folks, but
but no, my point
is.
Well, you said shit like 2 minutes ago, so but
fair point.
I just don't think he'd be worried about that. I completely forgot my other thing, so hopefully it comes back to me.
Ken checks back in. Do you guys prefer Milton, the backup, or Dobbs for the next couple of seasons? Also, could you see this team potentially drafting another quarterback in this draft? I would prefer Milton, but clearly they're comfortable with Josh Dobbs. He's a veteran. He's been on like 8 million teams, and he's made a couple dozen starts. So I don't know if he's made that many starts. I think he's made 12 or 15 starts in his career. But regardless of how many he's made, bottom line is obviously Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels, they're comfortable enough with him that he's going to be the backup next year. Now, as far as do I see them potentially drafting another quarterback? Yeah, if Elliott Wolf has any sway in this front office, they're probably either going to draft another quarterback late this year, or they're going to bring in an undrafted priority free agent. But there's going to be at least one, maybe even two quarterbacks that enter the fold here in the next few weeks. I definitely think that they're going to bring in more quarterbacks. They're not done in that regard. And this is why I've pivoted in my thinking now that they have enough draft capital with the 9 picks that they do have that I could see them using one of those on a late round quarterback, somebody like a Brady Cook from Missouri or a Seth Hennigan from a Memphis, somebody like that that could come in and potentially develop into a possible backup down the road. But they're good. They're definitely going to go into this season at least carrying May, obviously, and Dobbs. But they're going to need that third quarterback, and they may end up drafting that player.
What about one more? Let me throw one more name at you. Alex
Max
Bond.
Brosmer from UNH.
Yes, I was
Yeah.
gonna say, yeah. Any,
You're
any
about as
chance?
predictable as WWE
Hey,
scripting wrestling matches.
good content.
Well, I think Max would be a really good fit in this system.
Well, I was gonna say he's played in terrible weather. If nothing else,
Yeah.
you know we can handle that. So
Yeah, no, I think Max would make a lot of sense, and I think that he's a guy that's probably going to go in that 5th through 7th round range again, depending on what teams think of him. I don't think that they would invest that high a pick on him per se, but if he's sitting on the board with one of their last couple picks, yeah, I could see a scenario where they take him. And again, you're talking about a guy who's 6'2", 215, smart, plays with good anticipation, can manage the pocket, tough, gets the ball out. He's a quick processor. He's somebody that would fit this system. And he has a lot of experience in the West Coast offense and in the spread. So he's blended systems in his college career. He's certainly someone to keep an eye on as a possibility. And again, we're not pumping his tires because he played at UNH and he was a local guy for a few years. I genuinely think Max Brosmer would be a really good fit in this system. They had him in on Thursday when they brought in the local guys to work him out. So he's definitely someone that they're going to be very familiar with.
yeah, it's not just a UNH thing. He set records at Minnesota this year. He's a legitimately really good quarterback. So I'd love to see him end up here.
Yeah, and Ken checks back in. Appreciate you guys always answering my questions. Great knowledge all the time from Kevin and John. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for checking in, Ken. We appreciate it. And yeah, Ken, you know what? I know you got your own podcast out there, buddy. Maybe after the draft, either we or I can come on with you and we can talk some more about this. But thanks for checking in. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I think Brosmer would make a. To Ken's point, I definitely think they're going to either take a quarterback or they're going to sign one pretty early on after the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they do. You can't just go in with, May and Dobbs right now. So
No.
honestly, I'd be surprised if there's not at least one, maybe two more quarterbacks on this roster.
And another name to keep an eye on is Curtis Rourke. His brother Nathan was in here last year with the Patriots. So there's some familiarity with the family there, the player. Another name to keep an eye on. And there's a lot of other quarterbacks that are highly underrated that they could also bring in as undrafted free agents. I don't see them being in the market for somebody like a Will Howard. I would love that. I don't see that unless he falls. But again, a late round day 3 pick, yeah, I can absolutely see it. It would make a lot of sense at this point because, to your point, you can't go into the season with only a couple quarterbacks on the roster. Of course, on Tuesday, owner Robert Kraft met with the media. Big story of the week, of course, was Bill Parcells is going to be getting into the Patriots Hall of Fame as a contributor. I had a lot to say about that yesterday on Patriots Pulse with John Lyon. So I'm going to give you the floor, Stone. Just some thoughts on that.
So look, I'm a huge Parcells guy. I was only, let me do the math here, 5 or 6 when he got hired. But it's sort of the first instance of, me remembering my Patriots fandom. And I distinctively remember the talks about them possibly leaving to go to Connecticut or St. Louis. And I'll never forget, watching Bob Lobel on WBZ, as that was going down. Again, that's sort of my first Patriots memory, and the uniform change and the buzz that he created, and like how excited my father was, and all that for sort of a new era. And look, his draft single-handedly formed the foundation for the first Super Bowl. You can't deny it. Some of his drafts, 95 in particular, I believe, were Ted Johnson, Ty Law, and Teddy Bruschi, or something along those lines. His drafts legitimately.
You also drafted Troy Brown.
Yeah, I mean.
You also drafted Willie McGinnis.
Right. So his draft single-handedly.
And some will say that was Bobby Greer, and that's fine. I don't care. If that helps you sleep at night, say it was Bobby Greer. The bottom line, to your point, and I said this yesterday as well, He laid the foundation for the first part of the dynasty with a lot of those guys. Yeah, he didn't draft Brady. He didn't draft Seymour Light. Those were Belichick picks. But and you have to ask yourself this: do they win those 3 Super Bowls or even 1 or 2 Super Bowls without those guys that you just mentioned? Ty Law, Teddy Johnson, Teddy Bruschi, Willie McGinnis. I mean, Troy Brown. Those were huge pieces to the first. Those guys. And so that alone to me, regardless of how it played out with his exit to the Jets, that alone to me should get him into the Patriots Hall of Fame.
100%. And I'm also glad they're doing it while he's still around.
Yes.
He's earned that right. I'm also glad that he accepted it. We've heard about the sort of the disdain him and Kraft held on to each other for years. So I'm glad that's sort of water under the bridge. He should be going in. Look, given how sort of ugly breakups are in sports these days, what he did during that Super Bowl week and during that run, yeah, it's shitty, but it was also 40 years ago now, 35 years ago, whatever it was. So it's about damn time he's getting in. The Patriots really aren't where they are without that foundation that him and Drew Bledsoe helped lay. I don't care what you think about Bledsoe; he was severely underrated in this town, but he should be going in. It's about time. And again, I'm most glad that he gets to go in while he's still around to enjoy it.
It was 30 years ago, 29 years ago, but 40 years ago. Jeez, Stone. No, listen, I agree wholeheartedly. I didn't think he was ever going to get in, to be honest with you. I think he. John and I talked about this on the last episode of Patriots Pulse a couple of days before Kraft made the announcement. Neither one of us thought he was going to get in. We both thought Kraft's not going to put him in there. Too much animosity there. The Dynasty documentary glossed over him and didn't paint him in the most positive of light. So both of us said, we both universally agreed, no chance Robert Kraft puts him in. If he gets in down the road as a contributor, it'll be Jonathan Kraft that puts him in. But Mr. Kraft did the right thing. I think that he looked at this objectively. He's 83. Parcells is 83. They're not getting any younger. They're both in the later stages of their lives. And at the end of the day, I think he looked at it objectively and said, you can't deny this guy's impact. And you brought up a really good point. When Bush Orthwein hired him in 1993, you mentioned Connecticut. That was Kraft. That was after Kraft bought the team. When Bush Orthwein bought the team, he originally bought the team to relocate them to St. Louis. Remember now, Stan Kroenke tried to buy the team when Bush Orthwein put him up for sale. And I think the other thing that gets lost on people is Parcells made professional football in New England relevant. He made it relevant. You could sit there and talk about Patriot teams in the 70s. You could talk about, 76 and 78 and the 86 team. Yeah, and those were great stories, and the Patriots had some really good teams in the 70s. But at the end of the day, big picture, generally speaking, they were still an irrelevant franchise in terms of the NFL. They were an AFL team, probably the most irrelevant AFL team that came over to the NFL when the merger happened. But I think the other thing to keep in mind here is that he truly, and this is not hyperbole, and I know a lot of people are going to think that I'm overstating it because I'm a Parcells guy, but he saved pro football in New England. He did. I'm sorry. Because like I said, Bush Orthwein wanted to move the team to St. Louis. He not only made them relevant, but he saved professional football here. Robert Kraft saved professional football here a year later by buying the team. But when Parcells was hired, to your point about being a little boy and remembering that changed everything. Season ticket sales went up. The uniform changed. They drafted Drew Bledsoe #1 overall. It changed the entire trajectory of the franchise. And again, I don't think it can be stated enough. You can be pissed at him for the way he handled his exit and the whole, if they're not going to let you shop for the groceries line and going to the Jets, people can be pissed at all that. And I understand if you are. But at the end of the day, his impact on this franchise is immense, long overdue. kudos to Mr. Kraft for putting him in.
And if you're a sports fan, when he left, those Tuna Bowl games were some of the most hyped up games, maybe in the entire NFL at that time. Like those Monday night and Sunday night games were must see TV. That was sort of the start of the Jets hate with the Patriots, and it just sort of built from there. So, like people forget, Curtis Martin went down there. They went to an AFC Championship, almost beat John Elway's Broncos. Like that was good theater for a sports fan, whatever side you were on.
Yeah, and the Patriots Jets rivalry goes back even further back than that. But to your point, it definitely amped it up. But I think another point that needs to be made here is I think that people genuinely forget how bad the Patriots were in the late 80s and early 90s. People forget in 1990, Rod Ross, they go 1-15. 1992, under Coach Mack, they go 2-14. You bring in Dick McPherson thinking he had success in college, success at Syracuse. He's a program guy, knows how to build a program. He's relatable. He's going to turn this franchise around. It doesn't happen. They were terrible. Okay. They had 3 owners in a 6-year span between Billy Sullivan, Victor Kiam, and James Bush Orthwein. So again, I say it all the time. The fact that Bill Parcells was willing to take this job is unbelievable in itself. He didn't need to leave NBC and come back to coach and take over the New England Patriots of all time, arguably the worst team in the NFL at that time. I mean, it was them and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pretty much.
He could have ruined his legacy too.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the guy had won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants. He didn't need to come back. He could have waited for a better job to open up. The fact that he was willing to take this job and turn this franchise from a laughing stock to an irrelevant franchise and bring him to a Super Bowl in 96, where they lost to statistically, arguably the greatest team in the Super Bowl era. The Green Bay Packers in 1996 were the only team in the Super Bowl era to finish number 1 in total offense, number 1 in total defense. Like they were loaded. So it's not like they lost to some run-of-the-mill Packers team. They lost to a very good Packers team, a Packers team that probably should have won at least another 1 or 2 Super Bowls if you think about it. But nonetheless, I'm glad he got in. It's awesome.
Absolutely devastated me as an 8-year-old. That was my first sort of sports crushing moment. But look, Reggie White was unstoppable. And nobody helped him out that day. So I'm still not sure why. Also,
I don't know why they kicked the Desmond Howard.
That too. But Troy Brown was hurt and apparently wasn't in to have that assignment. So, but either way, no, it's well deserved. And again, at least he's here to see it and experience it, not later on.
And real quick, what did any thoughts on the comments Mr. Kraft made about wanting to win and the sense of urgency and that he's excited? Any thoughts on what he said at the owners' meetings?
I think we touched on it last week, but the succession plan thing stood out to me.
Yeah.
But he also said, give it 2 or 3 years. So does that mean he's expecting to win in 2 or 3 years? I thought that was interesting. And one thing we didn't get to real quick, Josh McDaniels also talked.
Well, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Hold your horses.
I thought we were going right to college after this, but
we are. But we got a couple more things to wrap up here with the Patriots before we do that. So,
all right,
the break, Stone. Relax.
I'll wait on Josh. But no, I thought the plan. I thought that's what stood out most to me in terms of Jonathan following him, and but he's clearly not ready to give it up. Which on one hand I respect, but on the other, if it keeps going this way and Vrabel doesn't work out, well, now it's all right. What are we doing? Let's sort of start that plan a little bit earlier. But look, he owns a team; he can do whatever he wants. So until he's ready to give it up, whether that's when he's 100 or whether it's 2 years from now, he can do whatever he wants. But I did find it interesting that he did at least acknowledge it and answer it.
Bill checks back in. Thanks for checking in, Bill. After Russ, there were around 17,000 season tickets or season ticket holders. So that's probably 5,000 to 7,000. There are probably 5,000 to 7,000 people like me who had at least a pair of ticks. Parcells gets hired, and soon thereafter, they start selling out for many years. He absolutely changed the franchise. Yeah, and again, it's interesting because I said this on Patriots Pulse. I think it's my generation knows his impact. My generation fully understands the impact he made. Generations before me fully understand the impact he made. It's not overstating it. And I know that we live in a world where recency bias trumps reality. But I know people want to get Edelman in and Gronkowski in and Vinny, modern candidates, but let's not forget what Bill Parcells did. And again, I'm glad he's going to be recognized because it is long overdue. Any thoughts on what Elliot Wolf told Michael Felger? I thought one of his answers was really interesting about getting on the same page last year with Gerard Mayo and the front office. He said that it was much more seamless this year. Any thoughts on that? I thought it was a pretty interesting comment.
So I did too, but I'm very curious to see how the press conference next week goes. That pre-draft one with him and Vrabel. If you remember last year, the one with Mayo and Wolf was very awkward, and they were almost defensive before the draft had even taken place. So in terms of being on the same page, look, I think it's very clear this is Vrabel's team, and I think it's a very good thing that that's the case. And Wolf is just sort of, I don't want to say going along because I do think he has an impact, but I do think it's Vrabel's team. So nothing really strikes me as, again, significant, I guess, from Wolf. But it's next week where I'm very curious to see how they interact and sort of who takes the reins on answering questions and stuff like that.
Adam J. Glacier checks in. Adam, thanks for checking in. Hey, guys, watching every show. Appreciate it. Well, we appreciate you watching, man. Thank you for taking the time, Adam. We really do appreciate you and you following along. Yeah, again, I just thought that comment was interesting. And Felger basically just opened his question and answer with him by asking him how things are going, and he immediately jumped into that, basically saying, "Yeah, things are different." And look, I'm not trying to stir the pot here. It is what it is. Mayo's gone. He's been gone now. But I do think it says a lot about that situation and the dynamic that existed there. Look, Gerard Mayo didn't have a Rolodex of coaches. Elliot Wolf went out, used his contacts, and put the staff together. There was a lot of back and forth there. And I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to it is they weren't on the same page. Again, that's why Mayo had to wait an extra week before they started voluntary workouts because they were trying to figure each other out. These are guys, most of them had never worked together before. They didn't know each other. They were trying to figure out what Mayo's like, what it's going to be like working under him. They were Elliot Wolf guys. So I just thought it was an interesting comment. And again, I'm not trying to stir the pot here, but I thought it was an interesting comment because I think it illustrates some of the dysfunction that did exist within the organization last year. I said this to John yesterday. That powwow that they had with the media, that little grab a bite to eat and get to know Gerard and the coaches, that wasn't just for Gerard and the coaches and the media. That was for Gerard and his coaches to get to know each other too. So I think that illustrates where they were as a franchise a year ago to where they are now. I just thought that his response was very telling. And I think if you read between the lines, like I said, it speaks to some of the dysfunction that existed here last year.
It's funny. It just popped in my head when you mentioned that little meet and greet last year. If you remember, I think some of the coaches, they sort of came in groups. Do you remember that? Like it wasn't like a
Mayo
full.
came in first.
Yeah. So you're right. It definitely was. And look, we've talked about the messaging since Rabel's first day. Like it just felt different. And now we've gone over this as well. Mayo just hadn't done it before. Vrabel has. So that's also something people need to keep in mind. But
and Vrabel put a staff together of mostly of guys that he either knows or he's coached with. So
yeah, and Mayo,
there's no ice breaking period. They know how each other thinks and they know what they expect of each other and what he expects of them.
Yeah, and Mayo legitimately said when they weren't starting OTAs early last year, it's because we need to have more meetings. I think that was verbatim. So yeah, they've already hit the ground running, so to speak, just in terms of the continuity with the staff and everything. But again, next week is going to stand out to me just in terms of who sort of takes the lead in that press conference, because that's an important press conference. It's the last time we'll hear from anyone before the draft.
Yeah, it is. Real quick, you were there. How smitten is Josh McDaniels with Drake May? Do you buy that he's smitten?
So look, I like to think I have a decent vocabulary as a writer.
It's okay. I mean, it's not great.
Fair. I have never used the word
across is kind of dumb sometimes.
100%. But I don't think I've ever used the word smitten to describe a football player and a coach.
Oh, I have.
Have you? Like,
Yeah.
honestly? That's funny.
Well, it's different when you're a coach, man. You have
So,
it. And now look, I will say this.
I
Okay.
couldn't believe you said it. I really
Yeah,
could.
no, and I understand why you would feel that way. It is an odd choice of words. I've never publicly come out and said I'm smitten with this player. I mean, I
Right.
might have said it in coaching conversations. Hey, I really like this player. I think he's going to be good for us. Man, I mean, again, I've been involved in football for over 30 years. So, truthfully, I'm not sure I've ever actually used the word smitten, but I've been in love with guys and what they've done for our team. All that
Sure.
being said, and again, I'm not afraid to admit that. I love my players, whether I was a head coach or a coordinator or a position coach.
No,
I
should you
enjoyed
be?
coaching my players, and I love being around them. I do agree with you, though. It was an odd choice of words. Uh, he should know better. I mean, he's won 6 Super Bowls here. He knows how this market is. You could say you're excited about Drake May and working with Drake May, but the smitten thing, a little odd to me. That's all.
Well, especially having not
Even
worked
though
with him.
I just admitted about a minute ago that I've used it before.
No, I mean, look, coaches, the whole loving your players thing, I get that. You have to. They're with them more than their families. So that's it was just a term that threw me off quite a bit. Like I had to stop from laughing almost. But um, look, I hope he is. This is a kid that they're going to be tied at the hip, hopefully for the next decade. You know what I mean? Like, I hope he's smitten with him. I hope he thinks he can work well with him. I hope he's impressed early on with him before they even get to football. So, having not really covered Josh, I think our first year we covered the team was his last year. So Drake May's rookie season. So 21. Having
Mac
not really,
Jones, you mean?
yes, yeah. What did I say?
You said
Um,
Drake May. I'm like,
oh,
dude hasn't
sorry.
been around here five
Yeah,
years. I don't know what the hell you're talking
yeah.
about.
No, sorry, Mac. But so having not really been in a press conference with him, there's a tone to him that's for lack of a better term, inviting. Like you can see why players want to play for him and be in the room with him because he's just he brings a mild manneredness to him. Now I know he's going to be fired up on the field and he's probably a yeller in meetings and stuff like that. But just in that short interaction that we had with him on what day was that Friday Thursday, um, it's impressive. He's an impressive guy to listen to. I'm excited to see what his offense now looks like. He was open about it. He said, "Yeah, look, it's going to have to look different than it did under Tom Brady." And you'll appreciate this. He talked a lot about the language. He said the language is always going to be the same, just some of the terms might be different, but the basis of the language will always be the same. So there's going to be elements of that Brady offense, but he's going to fit things to Drake May, to Bob Douglas, to Booty, to Diggs, to the personnel. So I'm excited to see what he can do, and I do think this offense is going to be a lot better than people think.
Adam checks back in, excited and smitten myself for the season. Yes. Yes, Adam, we are as well. Again, thanks for checking in, man. Appreciate you tuning in. Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and Vrabel actually alluded to this last week, is that they're going to be multiple. That's what gets me excited, that they're going to be multiple. And I know some of our fellow members of the media want them to run RPOs and use smoke and mirrors and motion and do all. You're going to do all that stuff. But when you're multiple, it enables you to play to the strengths of your team. If you hire Thomas Brown as your offensive coordinator, then you might as well hire Sean McVay because you're going to be sitting in 11 personnel the entire game. McDaniels isn't going to do that. He's going to mix and match personnel groupings. He's going to use a lot of formations, a lot of pre-snap motion. There'll be a lot of shifting and moving around. They'll have a diverse running game that will blend man-gap blocking schemes with zone blocking schemes. It's going to be great. And I think if you take what they did for 20-plus years under Belichick when they had Tom Brady, if you take what I call the East Coast offense and you blend it with some of these West Coast offense concepts and you incorporate some RPOs and some read stuff, then you're going to have a really nice package to play with, and you're going to be able to put your players in the best position to score points. So, look, he's going to be working with a talented group of players. You add a Diggs, you have a Henry, a Hooper, a Stevenson, you add a Matt Collins, you have a Kendrick Bourne. You have the young receivers. He's got plenty at his disposal now to get this offense going. And I think he will. And it starts with Drake May. If he can coach him up, and we know what Josh McDaniels can do with young quarterbacks. We saw it with Mac Jones. So we know he can get a lot out of this guy. And if he's smitten with him, I guess that's a bonus because now he's going to want to coach him even more and even harder. So, yeah, we'll see. You are watching / listening to the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Sarianides. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. Just a reminder, if you are in the market to sell your current home and purchase your next home, purchase your first home or refinance, give our good friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846, or you can shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available any time of the day, whether it's nights or weekends. Reach out to Herb or them, and they will help you out. It's the spring, which means it's real estate season. If you're in the market now, you need experience in your corner. Herb Devine has that experience. Again, give him a call at 781-254-2846 or shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. All right, let's pivot here and talk some college football. Of course, over the weekend, you were at Boston College. Our Paul Vazella was at Harvard for the Harvard spring game, and I did a spring visit with the UConn Huskies. Our Andrew Gwindon did a spring visit with UMass last Tuesday. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of these programs. One of the things, and you wrote about this today about starting off with BC, one of the things you talked about today is on anyfootballjournal.com is that recruits seem to be really impressed with the way Boston College operates and the way practice works and the tempo and the pace. Talk a little bit about that. What is some of the feedback you've gotten from recruits that have visited the Heights during spring ball?
Speed and intensity, the two words that come to mind.
Those are the two words that come to mind when I think of you.
Yeah, always. The antithesis of speed and intensity. But no, look, their practices, you know that guy.
Slogging barely has a pulse.
I knew you weren't done.
Yeah.
So look, they're an NFL training camp every practice. You've been there, you've seen it, and they should be. It's an NFL staff. There's dozens and dozens of years of NFL experience on that staff. So the intensity isn't a surprise, but it isn't spring ball. They're not in pads that often. So when they are, they're making it count. Excuse me. Saturday's spring scrimmage, controlled scrimmage, I should say, was as about intense as I've seen. And we cover a lot of college, spring ball. It's as intense as I've seen over the last 5 years that we've been doing this. Pads thudding, just guys chirping each other back and forth for 2 straight hours. Like, it's impressive, and you can see why recruits are being sort of drawn into it. The other thing that's impressive to me, particularly from the O-line recruits, is how much, excuse me, how much, I guess, sort of credit or appreciation Matt Applebaum is getting. And this is from guys that aren't being coached by him. This is from guys that are just watching him coach. And again, if you go on and read, you'll see countless kids mention Applebaum that are O-line recruits. So that one-on-one and that dynamic of the smaller group during an indie period, I think is so important for these recruits to see the coaches working with the guys. So a lot of kids have been impressed. Again, this past Saturday was very impressive. Just speed, physicality, a lot of plays being made on both sides of the ball. I think the secondary could be elite. The quarterback competition is closer than I would have thought it would be, just given the fact that, Dylan Larnigan hasn't been here very long, but receivers and running backs, I think they're deep. I know we're going to get to more of this when they wrap up next week, but there's a lot to like about that team. There's still plenty of questions, O-line, linebacker, all that, but you can see why recruits are impressed right now. It's a well-oiled machine down there.
Yeah, and of course, we're going to be there on Saturday for the spring practice finale as the Eagles wrap up spring ball on Saturday. No spring game this year, but we'll be there. We'll be double covering that on Saturday, and we'll be breaking it down for you Eagles fans. After that, as I mentioned, our Andrew Gwindon did go over to UMass on Tuesday. There's no media availability at UMass on Saturday, so Andrew covered practice for us on Tuesday. He had his 5 observations. Couple of things that he pointed out that I think are important here. One is Grant Jordan, the Yale transfer at quarterback. He's really impressed, and I talked to a couple of people that told me that he's been very impressive in spring ball so far. He's in the running for the starting job. He's going to be competing against A.J. Hairston and Utah transfer Brandon Rose. But by all accounts, Jordan is really impressed with the way he's picked up the offense, the way he's running the offense, managing things at the line of scrimmage. He's also been very impressive physically in terms of his timing, anticipation, getting the ball out. So if UMass can get quality quarterback play, that's going to be really important for them. Another area that they've been impressive is at the receiver position. Jaquan Gibson comes to mind. He's done a really good job. Andrew was really impressed with him. This receiving room has a lot of talent, a lot of young talent, and they've really been impressive thus far in the spring. The other thing that I think is important for UMass, and I've talked about this, when Joe Harris-Simiak got hired and he hired Mike Bajakian, and you know this, Kevin, you covered Boston College when Bajakian was the offensive coordinator there. They've refortified the offensive line. They're going to want to be bigger and more physical up front. And a big reason for that is going to be because they want to run the football, especially inside the tackles. By all accounts, they've been doing that this spring. They've been trying to set a physical tone. Joe Harris-Simiak has been encouraging that. Lots of positives on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, they've got some length, they've got some athleticism, especially in the front seven. They got guys that can really get after it. They really fortified the front seven in the transfer portal. Remember, they brought in 27 transfers prior to spring ball. So the front seven was an emphasis, and they were able to do that. And by all accounts, the front seven has looked pretty good. Of course, Tyler Martin at linebacker helps, having somebody who's been in the program and can stabilize things. They also fortified the secondary. The UMass secondary was pretty good under Don Brown. They had to go out and fortify that in the portal. But by all accounts, UMass has looked pretty good, especially since they've come back from spring break, Kevin. They've looked really good on offense. They've looked pretty good up front on both sides of the ball. And a lot of the new faces that Harris-Simiak and his staff have brought in, those guys have started to get acclimated with how he and the staff want to do things.
Yeah, look, you talk about culture, and this isn't to say that Don Brown didn't build a culture. He did, and it was a good one. It just wasn't successful on the field. But this seems like a younger one, and for lack of a better term, like it seems like it's easier to buy into. Do you know what I mean? It's just I don't know. Something feels different about this particular set. I guess if the set, the standard that's being set by Harris-Simiak feels different than it did under Brown, and I'm not really sure why. I don't have any, I guess, tangible
I don't
evidence.
think it's that the standard is different. Look, with any coach, and you know this, it doesn't matter what the sport is, every coach is going to have a different approach.
Sure.
And I think Harris-Simiak's approach is much different than Don Brown's. Look,
So
we all love Don, and Don's one of the best defensive coordinators in college football history, at least in the last 30, 40 years. Okay. That's not hyperbole. I'm not kissing up to him. I'm being honest here. I've been around the guy for a long time. I know. That being said, Don was tough on his players. His players loved him, and they loved playing for him. But he was tough. He drove a hard bargain. Now, Harris-Simiak is tough, but his approach is completely different. It's not so much about the raising your voice and the intensity in your voice and getting after guys. It's not about that as much as it is connecting with them on a different level and having coaches that connect with them on a different level. Harris-Simiak knows what he walked into. He knew he walked into a tough situation. He knew he was going to have to replace a lot of players, but he also knew that philosophically he was going to need to be much different in his approach than Don Brown. And I think he's done that. Now, if you want to label that refreshing and different and however you want to look at that and talk about it, that's fine. That's up to you. But I think at the end of the day, I do think that matters, especially because a lot of these guys that are on the roster now, they never played for Don Brown. They don't know Don Brown. Joe Harris-Simiak is what they know at UMass. So that is an important thing to point out. But I do think ultimately his approach, the way he deals with players on the field, The expectations might not be that different, but the approach and the style of communication is noticeably different. And people that have been around the program have told me it's evident when you go to practice.
So ironically enough, you just said it way better than I did after touting my vocabulary. So,
Well,
yes,
you did say earlier you have a limited
that's
vocabulary, so I thought I'd have
um,
to step in and help out.
but yeah, that's what it feels like over there right now, and I think it's going to serve them well. The other thing too is that many transfers. If you're coming here, I know it's hard to expect to win right away, but you have other options as a transfer, right? So you don't have to come here. Those kids believe in Harris Simiak, and they expect to win now. So I think those two things go hand in hand ultimately. So hopefully it shows on the field. And again, I think having that conference and that national spotlight, that can certainly recharge and sort of re-energize kids during spring ball too. So there's reason to be optimistic over there, but we can't. I'm not going to completely, blow smoke up their ass until we see it on the field. But there is reason to be optimistic over there right now.
Oh, absolutely. On Saturday, I visited Yukon for our annual spring visit, and it was a great visit, great opportunity to visit with Coach Moore on the Huskies. I love going down there, enjoy being around the program. As usual, a great practice. Tempo was good, pace was good, situational heavy practice. That was the emphasis. It wasn't so much about individual and group period as much as it was about team situations. They had the background noise pumping. The background noise was a little weird. It sounded like a chainsaw and a car wreck and people screaming. I'm like,
Jim
what
Moore is
stadium
different.
does this happen
Jim
in? I
Moore
mean,
is a different
this
cat.
is this is this is shit that happens in a haunted house, not a stadium. But nonetheless, the whole idea was to pump in the noise and challenge the players and challenge their focus and their attention to detail. And I thought Coach Mora and his staff did a really good job of that. A very active staff, an aggressive staff. Coach Samus on offense, Coach Brock on defense. Joe Fignano is back. He got a seventh year, which is hard to believe, but he is back. He's playing again. He's recovering from a shoulder injury. We met with Fignano after practice. He didn't want to get into too many details as to why he ultimately chose to come back, but he is back. That quarterback room is deep and talented. You also have Nick Evers, Wachusett's Tucker McDonald, Cole Welliver. Uh, they also have another young quarterback that I like, Kason Farrer. He looked pretty good, pretty athletic. So that quarterback has got some really good. That quarterback room, I should say, has some really good depth. They're a little thin at running back. Cam Edwards is out for the spring, so Victor Rosa got the majority of the touches. I thought he looked pretty good. The offensive line, which is a big question mark for them going into next season, you graduate Valentine Sen and Chase Lunt and Chris Fortin. They look really good. I thought they looked good. You still have plenty of experience coming back with Karsten Cassidy and Wes Hoey, and you got the transfers that have come in as well. You also have Ben Morosky. He's back. You have Ty Chan, Jaden Bass, who played at Springfield Central. He's in the mix. Toria Johnson's in the mix. So they've got a lot of bodies up front. They've got a lot of depth. And I like a lot of what I saw from those guys. I thought they were pretty impressive, especially in the run game. They did a really nice job opening holes for the backs. And then their depth at tight end and wide receiver. They got plenty of guys that can make plays. Some of the local guys, Jackson Harper, Teddy Williams, they really popped to me. Jared Jones popped to me. They've got some guys there outside of Skylar Bell that can make some plays for them. And then defensively, you graduate a lot. You lose Jelani Stafford, Price Yates, but I really like what they have coming back. A guy that really stuck out to me is another local product, Shrewsbury's Cooper Ackerman. Thought he had a pretty solid practice. I really like what they have on the back seven. I think Tyrese Mills, the Penn State transfer, is going to be a huge addition to that team. Damon Brinson looked pretty good. So there's a lot there to like with this Yukon football team. Almost said Holy Cross. With this Yukon football team. And look, I talked about this with a couple of people there. Can they replicate last year? It's going to be hard to do. And it's not just because they had a bunch of home games and they capitalized on it. The schedule's not that daunting. It's manageable. They could certainly win 7 or 8 games again. Absolutely. The question is more about how do you replace the guys you lost. Now, getting Fagnano back, I think, is huge. It helps. Getting Cam Edwards back is huge. It helps. They got to get healthy in the backfield. They got to get Mel Brown back, too. But I do think that at the end of the day, Kevin, this team is very well positioned to make another run at 8-4 and possibly win 9 games again in a bowl game.
I was gonna say I go so far as to say expectations should be no lower than 8 wins. You're in
Well,
year
that's a good point, and you're right, and I think that has to be the standard now.
so
You've
that
set a standard there that has to be the standard.
that's where I'm at. Is now you're in year four. This isn't a rebuilding program anymore. They're on the other side of that now. This is an 8 win. We should be in bowl contention every year. We really should be in a conference, but we should be in bowl contention every single year now type of program. So I don't think it can be overstated how important having Fagnano is too. To have that guy just cemented in there, knows the system, knows what Mora wants, knows the expectation of the fan base and the donors and all that. So I have high expectations for that UConn team. Like when they play BC this year, I'm expecting that to be a game again. That's the type of team I expect to see out of UConn this year. Again, I'm expecting 8, if not 9 wins. Now, again, you mentioned the schedule last year was just so absurd. 6 straight home games at one point. Like you're never going to see that maybe ever again. But at this time last year, we said they had to take advantage, and they did. So now, if your expectations are higher, can you meet them? Can you now meet the standard that you have set yourself? So I have high expectations for that program this year.
Yeah, as do I. And again, I think there's enough talent returning that they can replicate last season. The schedule is going to have some bumps in the road. You're not going to obviously have as many home games as we said, but it's not so daunting that if some of the guys that have to step up and step in and replace some of those key starters, if they have a good camp and they develop early, they're going to be in the mix. They're going to be competitive to win some of those games. So my expectation is that they're back in a bowl game again in December, and my expectation is that 7 to 9 wins has to be on the table. And again, you've set a new standard now, and it can't be stated enough. The women's basketball team wins another national championship yesterday. They've won 3 straight basketball titles between the men's and women's programs. The hockey team was an overtime goal away from the Frozen Four. The baseball team had a tournament run a couple of years ago. So the other major sports on campus, they're having success. They're good. And so football, who in many ways sets the tone for an athletic department, that's the sport that does set the tone for an athletic department. You want to prove that you can consistently be good. Another reason why you want to prove that is if you want to get into a conference eventually, you got to show conferences that, hey, we can do this year in and year out. We're not going to be good every 2 or 3 years, and then we're going to have a couple of down years and then bounce back. You can be competitive like this year in and year out. So here's to them hopefully getting into a conference. It's not looking good like it's going to happen anytime soon, but certainly consistency helps. And if they can have another winning season, excuse me, then they can definitely find themselves in a conference at some point. Harvard also wrapped up spring ball on Saturday, a little early, but they wrapped up spring ball with their annual Crimson White game. Our Paul Vonzella was there. Pretty impressive performance by the Crimson team. And I think when you look at Harvard, you were there 2 weeks ago. Andrew Orich spoke with us at the Massachusetts High School Football Coaches Association Clinic. Very pleased with what he's seen. A lot of talent coming back. This is a program that, once again, if not the favorite in the Ivy League, should be among the favorites. They closed out a really good spring for them.
Yeah, biggest development the other day was the receivers. We talked about, I think last week, about replacing Cooper Barkate. It looks like they have plenty of guys to do it. So, and Jaden Craig, the quarterback, didn't even play. And there was still 31 points scored. I don't think I've ever seen 31 points in a spring game for any team. Usually those are, 6-3, 10-9, sort of just get through it, get healthy. But Harvard put on a show the other day. And after last year, I didn't think it was possible to replicate the offensive performance that they did, but they might be better this year than they were a year ago.
Yeah, which is hard to believe because, again, Cooper Barkate was such a big part of that offense at wide receiver. But you're right. I think they might be better than they were a year ago offensively. Their running game's going to be really good. I think Xavier Bascon's going to have a big year for them.
Yeah, they're
But
full
they've got
game.
a slew of running backs that they
Yeah.
really like. And by all accounts, the offensive line really came along this spring, which I think is huge for them. If they can replace some of the guys that graduated, Michael Entwistle, Austin Gentle, if they can replace those guys, I think they'll be in pretty good shape. They certainly have the bodies, and I think by all accounts, those guys had a really good spring. So that's huge for Harvard. Bryant also wrapped up their spring on Saturday with their annual spring showcase. Stonehill is going to be hosting a spring showcase on Saturday. They're not doing a traditional spring game either. Merrimack is playing their spring game on Friday night at 7. We hope to be there to cover that. Did I miss anyone? I mean, we're running the gamut here.
Holy Cross on Saturday. I'll be there.
Holy Cross on Saturday. Kevin will be there. He will be at Boston College, right? And then you're going to make your way west to Holy Cross. And depending on when that Stonehill showcase is, I may be doubling up as well, going from Boston College to Stonehill, to be determined.
Yeah, it's a big news for Holy Cross. Weather depending, they'll be inside Fitton, which is a cool little difference. Usually it's on the back practice field the last few years that I've covered it. So getting fans inside the stadium, always a good thing.
It is. And it's great to see. And it's hard to believe spring ball is wrapping up. We got about another week. UMass's spring game is on April 19th. URI spring game is on April 19th. So it is hard to believe that spring is wrapping up. Conversely, Brown just started spring ball last week. I'll be visiting with them next week. Dartmouth kicks off spring football tomorrow. Maine is into week 2 of spring ball. UNH is going into week 2 of spring ball. So while some of these spring practices are wrapping up, other ones are ramping up. A couple of high school news and notes. The Merrimack Valley Conference, the MVC, announced a showcase. It will be on Wednesday, May 21st at 7 p.m. at Andover High School. The MVC joins a long list of public school leagues and conferences now that are holding these showcase days. And quite frankly, Kevin, they have to do it. You got to keep up with the Joneses, and they have to keep up with the NEPSAC and the private schools.
My first thought was, when does the MIA just have a big one? A sanctioned one. Not that these aren't technically sanctioned, but it's taken a while just to get to this point, right? Like, better than anyone, these have been, wanted for years by coaches around the state. So how long until the MIAA just said, screw it, let's do a pro day type thing that, everybody can be involved in? I don't think that's coming anywhere in the near future, but it is good to see everybody sort of jumping on board. And you said it, man, and we've talked about this the last few weeks. You see more and more kids doing PG years because you can't get recruited out of high school. If you're going to get recruited out of high school, you need to be on the map. The only way you get on the map is these showcases. So good idea all around.
Yeah, I agree. And you do have a couple of new coaches in the MVC, and Coach Cerullo at North Andover and Coach Fielding in Andover. They were instrumental in this, so I want to thank them. They took some time to talk to me about the showcase. So we're excited, and our plan is to be there to cover it. So as always, we encourage you to follow along, because we're going to be covering the Connecticut and Massachusetts showcase days on the 13th and 14th. We're also going to cover the Catholic Conference showcase. And like I said, we hope to be at the Hockomock League showcase on May 11th and the MVC showcase on May 21st. We're going to try to get to a couple of them down in Connecticut too. Bear with us, folks. We're trying to get to as many things as we can. As always, it depends on people's availability and whether or not they can cover these things for us. It's only Kevin and I, and we can only be at so many places at once. One other important note, Staples High School in Connecticut hired Matthew Jackloff as the new head football coach. Jackloff was the associate head coach and offensive coordinator under Adam Behrens. He is a graduate of Staples High School, class of 2015. I think this is a terrific hire. It makes sense to keep it in the family. Of course, Staples went 10-2 last year. 2 years ago, they won the Class LL state title, defeating West Haven. Last year, they lost to Greenwich in the semifinals in a really good game. It was a 14-7 game, but congratulations to Coach Jackloff. He is in the building, so I think that's another important part of this. But Staples keeps it in the family, and this is a program that's one of the best programs in Class LL. This hire should allow them to stay at the top in the Connecticut high school football landscape in terms of the public schools.
We talk a lot about keeping, tradition alive, and those programs that, if you have a coach that didn't grow up in a program or hasn't been around a program for a long time, it might not mean as much. That's not to say they don't care, but again, it's you coached at Norwood, right? It meant a ton to you. So um, the fact that you have a guy that knows what it means, can keep things rolling, I think it's important.
It is important. A solid hire for Staples, and again, I think it's important to reiterate that not only is familiarity important, but I think that the other thing is you know he's a young coach, he's a passionate coach, and he's going to be there for the long haul. And I think when you're a program like Staples, that matters. We talked about John Capodice coming back last week and taking over at Berlin again, where he won a state title a few years back. It's nice to see that some of these Connecticut openings are being filled by good quality coaches that care about those programs and care about Connecticut high school football, and that they're going to keep things rolling with both of those programs. By the way, I do want to give it a shout out to Coach Chad Neal. I ran into him on Saturday at UConn's spring visit with UConn. Coach Neal, of course, is the head football coach at Killingly High School. I also ran into Soren Reef, who's been on the recruiting visit with us. Soren did a PG year last year at Canterbury. He is going to be at UConn in the fall playing for the Huskies. So it was great to run into those guys. Coach Neal, class act, runs one of the best programs in Connecticut. Hoping to have him on the coaching chat here in the near future, or the coaches chat, I should say. Adam checks back in, moving back home sooner than later. Finally be back in my city going to my games. That is awesome, Adam. Great stuff. Thanks again for checking in, man. And when you do move back, let us know what games you'll be going to. And if you're at the game while one of us is there, please feel free to come up and say hi. All right, final thoughts here, Stone. Tonight was a long one.
It was. I was just looking at the time. Good stuff tonight, though. No, look, again, continue to follow us. The Patriots draft stuff. I know you're going to have a ton on it coming up. We'll be down in Gillette that entire week, which is wild. It's 2 weeks from now. I'm looking at my calendar.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'll be at BC in Gillette both tomorrow and Thursday. BC wraps up spring ball, as you said. Saturday, we'll be down there. You won't get what we do anywhere else. I can promise you that. And that's not just me tuning our own horn. Nobody does college like we do. So please continue to help us out. And also, real quick, thank you to everyone that stopped me at BC on Saturday, just to kind of mention or thank us for what we do. And it's much appreciated, and good to know that the work does not go unnoticed.
Yeah, no, and I couldn't agree more. And again, like I said, your support means everything to us. It allows us to get out there and cover games and produce as much football content as we can. We know you have a lot of great options here in New England, in the Massachusetts market, but if you're not familiar with us, give us a look again. Visit anyfootballjournal.com. You can subscribe for $2.99 a month. You're getting some of the best football coverage in the region. If you can't subscribe, maybe you purchase a hat, a sweatshirt, anything you can do to support us helps. Again, we put our resources back in the business. We want to try to produce as much content as we can. And we do appreciate you guys and everything that you do for us. And like Kevin said, and I couldn't agree with him more, keep the kind words coming, because sometimes in this business, when you're up late nights writing or editing or doing whatever you're doing, sometimes you need that boost. And I don't want to get corny about it, but people's good words mean a lot, and that they certainly motivate us to do even more and try to produce even more content. We know we have a ways to go. We know we could be doing a lot more, and we're working on that. And stay tuned, because like I tell people all the time, we're always looking to do more content-wise. All right, well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the New England Football Show. For Kevin Stone, I'm John Sarianides. Till next week, be safe, and we'll talk to you then.